So, a couple days ago, Cade Cunningham got injured. Well, not a couple days ago. Yesterday, an article was released telling us that Cade Cunningham has been diagnosed with a collapsed lung. Sad. It's always horrible to see a young star go down, but it's even worse when it's a young star that is going to get recognition on an All-NBA team. This would have been Cade Cunningham's second All-NBA team ever, which is crazy. I think he's 24 years old and getting his second All-NBA team. That's nuts. That's craziness. But he's not getting it, which is horrible. Because the Pistons are the number one seed in the East, and Cade Cunningham is the soul of the team. He's the soul of the city. He's the soul of the team. He is the reason they are the number one seed. And he won't even be recognized for that. But maybe this is a good thing. Not that he won't be recognized, but that maybe this collapsed lung will lead to a rule change in the NBA. Maybe it will lead to a realization from Adam Silver that he is not implementing these proper rules. But I digress. Cade Cunningham has played 61 games, and he needs 65 to qualify for an MVP, even recognition, MVP vote, or an All-NBA team selection. With only 14 games left, there is roughly a 2-week recovery period that Cade Cunningham has to be able to come back and to make those 65 games. The math there is a nightmare, which is crazy because we don't want Cade Cunningham rushing his recovery. We don't want him to be injured again. We want him to be able to have a proper recovery so he's back for the playoffs and he can make a proper playoff run. So, look, he's having one of the best seasons of his career. And this is one of the best Pistons seasons of all time. And it's about to be technically erased. Not erased, it won't have ever happened, but it won't be remembered in the long run. Why? Because these awards are usually what give great NBA seasons longevity. This is what gives them life, forever life. And adding on top of that, if your star player gets an All-NBA recognition or an MVP vote, maybe even one or even a couple would be good. That allows your season, whether that's the greatest season of your career, like the Warriors, the 73-9 Warriors, or whoever team you may be, especially the Pistons, from going from such a bad record to the number one seed. This means so much to them. But because their star player is going to be out and he won't be able to get an All-NBA vote or an All-NBA selection or MVP selection or whatnot, this team might not be remembered. This season of them might not be remembered in the long run. But I could hear you saying, they're going to be a number one seed. Number one seeds are always remembered. Yeah, but like I said at the start of the video, Cade Cunningham is the soul of this team. Now, I'm not saying this team can't win without him. They have. He's been injured. He's sat out a couple games. But it's not like, they were winning crazily. They were barely winning. And this is sad because if they lose the number one seed, that will solidify what I just said. That this season won't fully be remembered by NBA historians as a whole. It'll be remembered with Detroit Pistons fans. It'll be remembered with the city of Detroit. But it won't be remembered from, 20 years down the line if an NBA enthusiast is going back in time. Looking back, on NBA reference. this 65 game rule was implemented to stop, those load management heroes. those players who rely on load management to get them by. The ones who won't actually fully recover because they can get away easily. Those guys who sit out because they're tired or, because they can. This wasn't a rule to be implemented to punish a guy for a freak injury while he's fighting for the top seed. This is a rule that is too broad. And maybe it's not giving enough leeway for injured players to be even recognized. Because we've had, ever since this rule has been implemented, or before this rule has been implemented, we've had all NBA players that have been having all-star caliber seasons or MVP caliber seasons play less than 65 games. There was a video that I had watched about, the same topic, the Cade Cunningham, and it inspired me to make this video and talk about what I'm talking about now. And a great point was brought up. I believe it was by Rusty Buckets. And, he brought up the fact, Scottie Pippen, one of his seasons, he only played 55 games and he was an All-NBA player. And that's a great argument to be against this 65 game rule. Now, in his video, he also said he's not someone who is against a limit. I too am not against a limit. But I think this limit should be lower. This limit should be not the amount of games you played, but I definitely think you should take into consideration maybe consecutive games you missed. 20 consecutive games missed, that means maybe you're not eligible for an All-NBA team or an MVP, Or if they lower the limit to maybe 60 or maybe even a percentage, 65 games, 70 games. 70% of the games need to be played to even be recognized or whatnot. But this 65 games limit that you need to hit before you're recognized for any of this, it's too much. It's making these players rush the recovery. And in an era where the pace is faster than ever, they're running up and down the floor faster than ever. More injuries are happening. These athletes are more injury prone than ever before. Whether that's because they're not drinking so much milk as a kid, who knows? But what I do know is that there's more injuries than not nowadays. And it's upsetting to see because you never want to see these great athletes be injured. But not only that, this rule, this 65 game rule, it definitely diminishes the product that we see as viewers. Because if you tell a player whose dream, their whole life, whose whole life's dream has been to make an All-NBA team or be crowned the MVP of the league, that if he doesn't play 65 games or more, he won't get that. Imagine what that does. That player isn't going to want to risk, jumping into the stands for the ball. He wouldn't want to be making those hustle plays. Those plays that get the crowd energized. Why? Because he can get injured, and the next thing you know, he's not going to be eligible for an MVP. So, this really opens up all our eyes to the problem that the NBA has. And another thing that I want to see is that I want these voters to also take into consideration what these players went through. The team that they have with them. And, but not only that, obviously, scoring matters. Obviously, the storyline matters. I believe the voters who get to vote on the MVP are not proper. They need to have more unbiased media. And it's hard to get unbiased people. But somehow, some way, they need to do it. Because this is the best and the most prestigious accolade you can get in this league. And it's being tainted by some limit. It's crazy. It's foolishness. It's really, really foolishness. Now, without Cade Cunningham, the Pistons can fall. And I've already talked about the repercussions of them falling. But this leaves the East open. This leaves the Boston Celtics. This leaves the Cavaliers. This leaves the Knicks to snatch up that crown for the first seed and to be able to go on that run that the Pistons might not be able to go through. This could also maybe allow the Raptors to sneak in. This could maybe allow the Heat to sneak in. This could allow a whole dynamic shift, because maybe now, in the West, people aren't going to be preparing to go against Cade Cunningham, but they'll be preparing to go against Jalen Brunson or Donovan Mitchell. But this is really, really, really upsetting, because it does, like I said, shows the problems we have. I have nothing else to say about it, to be fair. I'm really, really upset about it. And I've tried not to let my emotions show throughout the video. But yeah. Let me know in the comments, do you think the NBA should lower the threshold? Am I right to say that they should lower the threshold to 60 games, or maybe make it into a percentage? 65% of games you need to play. Maybe they need to reevaluate the whole award, regulations. Maybe they need to add an extra award. Let me know in the comments what you think. Who do you think the MVP is going to be this season? I definitely thought it might have been Cade. No, I didn't. I'm lying. But I did think he would be up there for votes. I won't lie. I think it's going to be Shea. I think he could, but I definitely think Cade was a lock for all NBA. Nonetheless, though, let me know your thoughts on this topic. Let me know what you would implement differently in the NBA. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Peace.